teachers who ended up working at schools that you attended as a student. What behind-the-scenes secrets, dirt, or teachers' lounge gossip did you learn that you were clueless of as a student? I was a private school teacher at a school I attended as a student. The school had no infrastructure for special education or IEP students. They basically told parents they could send students there, but they're not getting any additional accommodations. I never connected or understood this as a kid, but every time we'd get a different student, they rarely lasted more than a year. That's because private schools aren't required to by the government/law like public schools are. This is the same reason why some private schools can be run cheaper than public schools. They are not required to accommodate every student. If there is a special needs student that only speaks Mandarin, the public school has to figure it out, private does not. I found out the school I work at has a decommissioned shooting range in the basement. Someone up above said the same. Maybe you all know each other. Shooting used to actually be taught in US schools. It's probably more widespread than most of us think. I work at the school I attended. Nothing weird, but drinking/hanging out with your former teachers and principals is kinda cool, honestly. Conversely, I wonder what it's like for a teacher to suddenly have a former student as a co-worker. When I was in 6th grade, our new PE teacher was a former student of our grade teacher. Luckily he had nothing but good things to say about the guy, but I'm sure that's not always the case. I've been teaching for 19 years now, and I currently work with a former student. I liked her as a student and I like her now. It's great to be able to relate to each other as adults and not watch everything I say because of the student-teacher dynamic. I'm neighbors with a former student of mine and we've become good friends. The only downside? I feel old. This is kinda related, I'd say. It's about my school rather than the teachers. My high school had a theater and put on one huge production every year, along with smaller things like talent shows and such throughout the year. There was a light and sound crew open to any student that worked on building the sets alongside setting up lights and sound. I was on the crew for a while, and the leader was a teacher/director I highly respect, but he was also super chill and a good judge of character, trusting us with keys and access to stuff students would never see. One of my friends who was higher up in the crew unlocked and took us through some tunnels underneath the school. I had no idea that they ran underneath around 75% of the school. Our high school was pretty large, 1,000 plus people. Large for my city, okay guys. You had to crouch to go through at some points, and there was even a trapdoor from them that was in a janitor's closet attached to a teacher's lounge. It's funny to think that I've walked past the wall the closet was behind so many times and never knew that there was a trapdoor to underground tunnels that I never thought were there. Added detail. Careful going underground. Sometimes you can meet someone who looks just like you. Excuse me, what? The year after I graduated, 4 teachers were suspended from teaching for a few months, including the psych teacher who was one of my favorites. The school didn't really announce why, just that they would be suspended. They came back to teaching there later when the suspension was up. When I started subbing there a few years later, I found out that they had been bullying another teacher for being gay. I lost a lot of respect for my psych teacher after I learned that. My school had an old lunchroom, an entire portion of the building that was only accessible through 2 doors. I cannot say with certainty that this is true, but rumor has it several teachers ended up turning that room into a suitable living area and slept there for a few months. I didn't think it was that crazy until I remembered at least 2 of those teachers had a history of drug use, LSD, MDMA and cocaine. What went on in that old lunchroom is anyone's guess. The teachers were probably hugging and kissing in there, those sick bastards. Or even more despicable, the hand-holding. You should hear the way teachers talk about students. They are brutally honest in teachers' meeting. And in the halls after the students are gone while their custodian is walking by collecting their room's trash. I told one of them just the other day that, there is a reason why I do what I do instead of what you do. What's it like being a school janitor? I feel like I have the temperament for it, lol. not a teacher, but I was an IT technician at my high school about 6 years after I graduated. The staff at the school all share stories about students among each other, so they all knew who was good or bad, they knew who was dating who, they knew all the friend groups, they knew about students' social lives. This isn't stuff they'd ever be told directly, just observations. I swear, they knew more about the class than I ever would have as a student as part of the class. Also, as someone else said, it's actually kind of fun to have a beer or drink with your old teachers. Sometimes the ones you become friends with aren't the ones you ever would have thought would be the case when you were in school. I was dating this guy once in secondary school. We weren't out as gay yet, so the relationship was secret. I visited one of my pastoral teachers who loves to talk a lot, and then at some point she asked if I was still with this guy. I was shocked because none of my friends or his friends knew we were dating, and we didn't even spend that much time together in school. I asked her how she knew that we had dated. We broke up a few weeks prior, and she said in the study area, which she supervises 95% of the time, couples always seem to glance at each other in this certain way every time she was telling someone about her past relationships. She not only correctly guessed us but also listed 10 other secretive couples and even correctly guessed who this girl was cheating on this guy with. One pairing she got wrong then, as they weren't dating, but fast forward 5 years and now they are engaged. Dang, your teacher was hella observant. In high school, I really liked this one guy, but I only spoke to him every once in a while. We had a class together and 2 of my really good friends were in there too. They would always mess around with him and flirt with him. Then one day, all 3 of us were talking to my teacher and he said something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, you like the new kid, right?" And my friends were like, "Lol, nah, we just play around with him, but we don't like him like that." He shook his head, pointed at me, and said, "No, I was saying you like him." I was shaken to the core that he was able to pick that up because I didn't really talk to the guy much. I was also tight with that teacher, so it wasn't weird that he pointed his observation out. Turned out that he and my history teacher knew, they were good friends, and that's why we got seated closer to each other on the seating chart and they paired us together for group work. Those teachers were being my wingman and I didn't even know it. Lamau. Mrs. X, who was always the jerk AP English teacher, she hated the more inappropriate parts of our AP English books. Turns her husband cheated on her and she was in the middle of an unpleasant divorce. No wonder she couldn't stand any sex in famous literature. I'm not sorry for feeling she was a jerk, but, boy, did it make a lot more sense. Ah yes, Mr. X. X gon' give it to ya. My mom did her student teaching at the Catholic high school she attended. She didn't know that, while she'd been away at university, one of her favorite teaching nuns had left the order and gotten married. She almost had a heart attack when she recognized Sister Mary Irony in the halls one day and realized she had a solid 7-month pregnant belly. Sister Mary Irony. Oh man, I've definitely got one. I worked in the same department as my old teacher, one of the people who made me want to be a teacher. It was pretty cool. One day we're at a bar and he's telling me his biggest horror stories and mentions a girl that I knew from high school. Turns out she was selling blowjobs during class under the stairs. We only found out because she confessed it to my go-teacher. Apparently some kids had not paid her and she was really upset about the whole ordeal and she thought my colleague would be the only one who would listen. He was quite shocked to say the least. She was right, and he worked with the right counselors in the school to get her back on track and deal with some trauma. It never really spread around the school and I walked with her when I graduated. It was another checkmark on the list of why I looked up to him as a teacher though, and I try to be as open about listening to my students now. Edit, for some clarification since I don't want him to come off as a jerk. This stemmed from me speaking to him about a student confessing to buying drugs for their family. I was a new teacher and I was not fond of having to be a mandatory reporter. His advice stemmed from this story and other horror stories, that reporting to the right people can actually make someone better. He wasn't just bragging about somebody I might have known. I work at the school my kids attended. So if it counts, I'll answer. A lot of teachers smoke pot regularly. It's still illegal here, though. Frown. Shit, when I was in high school I sold to 3 of my teachers. I could skip all I wanted, just be there the days they needed a re-up-headed to answer the questions. I graduated in '09, so this was over 10 years ago when pot was far from accepted as it is today. I live in MD, so it was still illegal to possess any amount. I agreed to allow them to give me Cs. I wasn't a good student at all, and to high of grades would be suspicious how the arrangement started. 2 teachers pulled me to the side and just asked me about it. That's when I would strike a deal. I didn't sell dime bags, I was notorious for selling ounces and pounds. I made a living doing this at the age of 16. My family was dirt poor and couldn't afford shit, so I did what I had to make money. It wasn't hard to sell them weed. I would come in while nobody was there and give them the shit, they would give me the cash. We would have dots check our cars or lockers, but never us. If I was ever called down to the office to be searched, I'd hand it off to a buddy. It wasn't hard to sneak the system. They show their hand before making moves. Wait, so all those years I could have just sold them dope instead of giving them blowjobs under the bleachers? My 3rd grade teacher was killed when her car got stuck on the train tracks. Her husband was the principal. After I found out through parents that everyone was starting to suspect that the principal was seeing one of the teacher's aides. It was one of those uncomfortable things where a lot of the moms were after him because he was single, and so they were incredibly jealous and petty towards this particular aide. Years later, I found out the principal and this aide got married. Years after that, when they were both gone, I started working with my old elementary school. And that's when I found out the truth. That the aide and principal had started having an affair back when my 3rd grade teacher was still alive. She found out about their affair and her death was not an accident. She was actually on the phone with the aide when she purposely drove her car onto the train tracks and killed herself. Damn. I can't believe the aide was able or would want to continue the affair after that. Edit, a letter. At that point you're like, already committed. I work in IT at my old school district. All the teachers are just as immature as the students they teach, and most of the nicer teachers turn out to be dicks and horrible to work with. Also, everything is political and cliquey. I've found that there's definitely a difference in how teachers are seen by the staff/admin and how they are seen by/treated by students. I have seen teachers who were winning all sorts of awards and were praised by the admin be absolute assholes and pieces of shit to their students. There's a teacher at my school who literally flies around the country accepting praise for the great work she does in the classroom. A student showed me the comments that teacher had made on her essay in Google Docs that called the student stupid and that it was the worst thing she had ever read. The student was in tears. I don't talk to that teacher. Another teacher on campus is beloved by everyone and someone my little brother looked up to, until my brother came out as gay, and it turns out this teacher's is a seriously homophobic nut job in a cult. I don't talk to him either. Up and down my hallway there are teachers who are beloved by students and work incredibly hard and get zero recognition for it by admin or anyone else. At my high school a teacher was awarded Teacher of the Year. She was beloved by the popular kids, would stand around chatting with them for the first 10 minutes of class, gave everyone her Instagram handle at the end of the year, etc. However, she was kind of lazy in teaching, not good considering she was a math teacher, and when I asked her to go over problems I didn't understand, she basically would say, "I went over this already, you should know it or it's in your book, read it." I have no idea why admin and the popular kids liked her so much. The biggest surprise for me was that the teacher I adored as a kid is actually a douche. I loved him as a teacher when I was 14 years old, but I can't stand him as a colleague. This happened in a weird way to me while still in high school. Teacher taught freshmen and seniors. Thought she was amazing as a freshman, seemed laid back and funny. Realized how disorganized and unhelpful she was as a senior. It was awful. Sounds like managers. If everything is going well and people are doing their job, the laid-back manager who doesn't do much is great. When people start slacking off and stuff is falling apart though, you want the jerk manager to put his foot down. Not a teacher, but when I was in high school a female student's nude had been discovered on a flash drive that a male teacher gave to students if they didn't have a flash drive so they could work on projects at home if necessary. Obviously an investigation went underway and it was found that another student had put the nude on the flash drive, but amidst all the chaos and rampant rumors it was discovered that the male teacher was having an affair with one of the social studies female teachers, who was also married. Male teacher is still currently with his wife while the female SS teacher divorced her husband thinking that male teacher was leaving his wife for her. Fucking spicy as a 17-year-old lol. Fucking spicy even as an old fart tbh. Not me but one of my best friends. We attended high school together and she eventually ended up teaching in that school. My friend was asked who was the valedictorian in our batch. She mentioned girl A. The teacher can't remember her. So my friend said she's not into extracurricular that much so you might not remember her. But you may remember our top two, then mentioned the name R of batch's top two, to which the teacher blurted out, "Oh yeah, I remember her. That bitch and her mother, together with your advisor, harassed me to change her grades so she can make it top one." Former teacher. Can confirm. I would rather have a class of 30 lazy burnouts than 5 overachieving kids with insane parents. God forbid anyone in that class gets so much as an A. I'll get emails and calls for weeks asking how dare I give a minus. Honestly, all the kids that other, usually authoritarian, teachers hated for being poorly behaved. Those were my favorite students, and often mine was the only class they did remotely well in, meaning they got C's instead of failing. I teach at a school where a huge percentage of kids are like this. I'm highly practiced at putting entitled parents in their place with the politest language. The school is equipped for the lawyers. It's honestly fun dealing with them. Their initial email/contact is full of bluster and rage, but after I reply they're suddenly all calm and respectful and friendly. I work super hard to ensure that my grades are 100% objective and I can prove that they received the grade that they earned. Marriages and divorces, depressions, cancers, all of that shit about the teachers that you sometimes suspected but never really knew for sure. Also, teachers can be ruthless when talking about kids, but it's funny as hell. Drinking wine with some of my former teachers was fucking weird, but 100% would recommend. 2 of my teachers were married in my school. Woman was a dumpy little geography teacher, the man was your typical creepy gym teacher who liked to walk into the changing rooms. Came back to school after summer for 5th year. Geo teacher lost a fuck ton of weight and kept crying. P teacher wasn't there anymore. Took the students all of 2 hours on the first day to figure out they divorced. Woodwork teacher was a massive stoner, always falling asleep in class after taking a 15-minute break from class. That was kinda obvious too. Another teacher had cancer, but that took a while before we found out, like 6 months of her not being in school anymore. Not sure how big the school you went to was, but most of the stuff you listed was common knowledge to most of the students. It was my junior school, ages 11 to 14-15. We weren't paying much attention to the teachers unless there was some truly obvious thing going on. Being inside the teacher's lounge with them means hearing all about their life at home, who's got kids doing what, who is in a custody battle, who is not so straight. They also trash the students behind their backs, and the parents too. They can be vulgar, etc., but honestly it's pretty tame. Nothing scandalous. My friend and I both did taught at our former high school. He came up to me in the faculty office one morning and said, "Did you know some of the teachers think I went to blowjob parties when I was on the football team? What's a blowjob party? I wish I was going to those." To this day we don't know where they got this idea, or what a blowjob party is. Football players always project this very strong no-homo anti-gay type of sentiment, and yet they're the ones doing shit like throwing blowjob parties SMH. I think the idea is that there are girls at the blowjob parties, not the same school, but an old teacher. Whilst in year 10, my language teacher and a PE teacher were having a secret relationship despite everyone knowing they were both in a relationship with other people. Whilst doing my teacher training at a different school, I saw her briefly in the staff room. Later I caught up with someone else who worked there and said how I knew her. Found out that she actually married this PE teacher a couple of years before and was having an affair with another PE teacher in that school. Fast forward to going into my third of teaching, at the interview for the school I currently work at. Speaking to another guy at the interview, and he told me which school he was leaving, and it was my old secondary school. I asked him if he knew my old language teacher and the gossip of her, and he said he knew they weren't together anymore. The day goes on, I just finish having a tour of the school, walk into the staff, and there she was. Sat there on her laptop. Turns out she had also recently been employed there. Some PE teachers came in, also on their interview, and she made a beeline for the young male who was clearly about to start teaching. She clearly has a type. It's not fun being the youngest male staff member in the school. I know, all those cougar teachers just raring to jump your bones. I work at the private high school I went to, and the way the principal talks about past students was disgusting. She'd make fun of kids, talking about how they weren't popular, didn't have friends, stuff like that. Also, the boys club thing is rampant. Women do all the work while their male superiors take all the credit. A ton of coaches drank/drink with students and don't get in trouble at all. I took shots with the president of my school my senior year and had a couple beers with my science teacher at my ex's grad party. He drove about 40 minutes home shit-faced. Rampant smoking. When I was in junior high, I got to keep a project in the teacher's lounge, and for a week was treated to the permanent cloud of smoke that hung in it. Everybody except the gym teachers smoked like chimneys. In between periods, they'd run to the lounge for a quick drag or two and dash back to their rooms. I have no idea how they managed after smoking in public buildings was banned. After smoking in public buildings was banned, there was a law stating that you couldn't smoke unless you were X meters away from schools, as some teachers would run to the gate and smoke there. All of a sudden we started having issues with students smoking in the bathrooms. Fun part was, the smoke never came from the students' bathrooms. I didn't end up working at my old school, but I did run into my old guidance counselor, who had since moved districts, at a conference. I was mentioning the teachers I had had, and that the photography teacher always creeped me out. He confirmed that said teacher had been quietly fired for sleeping with students. And this was at a school where my AP history teacher was actually married to a former student. Nothing to see here. I supply at the elementary school I went to for 10 years. The married with children female principal was having an affair with the married with children male grade 4 teacher. She decided to inform the staff of their relationship 6 months into her pregnancy and about 3 months after she'd left her husband. They moved after the end of that year. Her name was Ms. Dick. The principal before her had embezzled $100K from the school before the new secretary realized, and he was asked to quietly retire. This place typifies my neighbor. Edit, math is hard. Not a teacher, but my mom is a teacher at a school I went to, and I still learned a few things. 2 things come to mind. The kinda reserved science teacher has full sleeve tattoos. That was a bit of a surprise. Every year the school does a raffle with a bunch of cool little items in it. I found out recently that it's rigged to go to a poor student. I mean, I'm not complaining, but I always really wanted to win it. I was shocked when I found this out. That makes sense. You can't just single out the poor kids and give them a gift bag of shit that could be degrading to them. Instead, you pretend that it's a random raffle and get the same result, but they feel like they won something. It's great that schools do that, honestly. The school district I went to was very small, and the teachers know you and your family. One of them very quietly took up a collection for some kid, and they ended up having a surplus of clothing. I interned at my old elementary school and subbed at the high school. Honestly wasn't as wild and debaucherous as some folks wish it to be. Biggest revelations, my old music teacher would fall asleep during after-school meetings and professional development with regularity. Sweet fourth grade teacher actually took no crap during after school meetings if someone was trying to push policy or curriculum that made no sense. High school teachers would gossip in teachers' lounge about students, though generally only occasionally in passing. And not always scandalous gossip. Just generally more aware of each student's social life than I'd have ever imagined they'd be. An example would be something like, "How's Steve been today? Turned in his homework but it was incomplete. Didn't really participate today. Heard he and Kristen weren't really talking anymore. Yeah, seems to be going through a rough time now but I think he's going to be better off in the long run." In hindsight, it was weird to consider that these folks were likely talking about me and my personal life in various regards a few years prior. Always assumed my life in school was relatively insular, but teachers see a lot more than we think. You know, those types of conversations are for the student's benefit, right? The teachers are actively involved in understanding why Steve's grades plummeted or he is suddenly acting out in class. A teacher may overlook class behavior or a few assignments because of what is happening away from school. As a teacher myself, yes, I am now acutely aware. I was more speaking toward the initial realization during interning and substitute teaching that my teachers' care and concern frequently extended beyond the classroom. That they have a secret basement. That's it? Nothing cool about it? Was it a fallout shelter? Or just where they stored extra desks? They store the substitute teachers down there. All the staff hated the deputy principal as much as the students did, if not more. I remember my teacher mom telling my dad one day how her principal has turned into such an A1 bitch. What exactly delegates one to A1 status? We recently discovered that my girlfriend's teacher, who would occasionally break down crying during class when the kids were being particularly childlike, was dealing with cancer during that time. We had a teacher get pregnant mid-year and hormones took over and she was prone to crying all the time as well. Same with a teacher of mine. Went to sudden full Spartan rage mode and then started crying. A lot students we'd pass just BC because we don't want to deal with them anymore, or because their failure would hurt funding and we were pressured to overlook failure of certain students. I taught at a technical school for one semester. I was forced to quit when I refused to pass an obviously failing student. The school's director brought me into his office and specifically said that if the student didn't pass, they would lose his tuition and I would be fired if I didn't pass him. I walked out in disgust. Yeah, that sounds about right. Funding is more important than education, and there is definitely a lot of inner politics behind grading and scoring of students. It's appalling how they treat kids as nothing more than numbers on a spreadsheet.